There's a pervasive stereotype that doctors are terrible with money, but I think it has less a matter to do with ability and more with how they allocate their time. See, most doctors put their focus on becoming a great doctor, and they simply don't put in the same time into educating themselves about finance and entrepreneurship. That being said, doctors possess many traits that would serve them well even outside of healthcare. Here is why doctors make for great entrepreneurs. First is the ability to delay gratification. To become a doctor in the US, you gotta do 4 years of college, 4 years of med school, 3 to 7 years of residency, plus 1 or more years of fellowship depending on your specialty. And throughout this time, most students are living an incredibly frugal lifestyle. Many are living solely off their student loans, and they're accruing hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, all with the hope that one day they'll earn enough to pay back all that debt, and with enough left over to make the whole ordeal worthwhile. The average medical student graduates with approximately $242,000 worth of debt, but they end up paying back between $365,000 and $440,000 after student loan interest. But the ability to grind hard year after year after year for a long period of time, it's a really valuable skill in becoming an entrepreneur. A lot of people can't delay gratification for even a few weeks, let alone years. I mean, a lot of people want to be in shape, but they can't sacrifice that short-term pleasure or endure the short-term discomfort of eating less and exercising more to achieve that outcome. And with business, it takes patience. You really need to grind hard year after year to really enjoy the fruits of your labor. When I left residency in 2018 to build both Med School Insiders and MEM, I wasn't making enough money to even pay rent. I had to move back in with my mom despite working 80 to 100 hours per week because the businesses, it takes time for it to build and grow revenue and such. But yeah, imagine that. You're in your late 20s, you finally got your MD, you worked your ass off for all your 20s, and then boom, you live at home with your mom. But every student that gets through their medical training and becomes a doctor, they have the skill set to delay gratification, and that's not gonna hold them back. This brings me to my next point, which is that medical students have the ability to live off a very small income. Because most med students are heavily reliant on loans, they get used to living off of very little and making the most of what little money they do have. And similarly, most business owners, especially early on, invest as much as they can back into their businesses. They have to be really scrappy. Alex Ramosi explains that when he was growing his gym business, he was asset rich but cash poor. So on the outside, he looked really successful. He had 6 gyms, but he had very little cash on hand because everything was reinvested heavily back into the business.
At the time when I had $1 million in my bank account, Layla and I were living together on $1,200 a month of rent and about $400-ish a month in food. And that's what we were living on. And we were taking home at the time $300,000 or $400,000 a month.
Mr. Beast, the biggest creator on YouTube, also describes how nearly everything he makes goes back into the business of creating better videos, often spending millions of dollars on a single video.
Actual cash, I'm probably the poorest person in this room. Like if I make $3-4 million a month, I just spend it on videos the next month. We literally like have razor thin margins and just reinvest it all.
That's wild.
This is sometimes what's required to build a successful business. If you're focused on growth, there may not be much left after expenses are paid. Now, because most med students are used to living a very frugal lifestyle, they're well equipped to endure that early stage in entrepreneurship where you have to be really scrappy and just survive off of very little. This next point is similar to delayed gratification, but medical students have also honed their ability to focus. Nowadays, we have an inattention epidemic. You've probably noticed your own ability to focus decline in the last decade or so. And I mean, just look at social media. Look at how much shorter and shorter pieces of content are getting. On Twitter, you have these short bits of text. On Instagram, you have photos. On TikTok and Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts, you're now chopping up these videos into even shorter and shorter and shorter segments. Thanks to social media, our ability to focus is getting more and more fragmented. But med students need to be very intentional to fight against this. They need to hone their focus ability because getting through med school successfully is less about your intelligence. It has much more to do with your work ethic, putting in the reps, and that requires focus. And that's just in the classroom or at home when you're studying. But even in your clinical years, your 3rd and 4th years, you're in the hospital, you're in the clinic, etc., you need to focus for several hours the whole day because you don't really have a break. And this ability to focus translates very well to business because business generally requires a higher intensity. You're not just clocking in and clocking out and doing mindless work. You're being very creative, you're problem solving, and it requires a higher level of intensity and focus that med students have honed. As they say in the military, you have to learn to embrace the suck, which is something that medical students are pretty good at.
Embrace the suck. Adapt to the suck.
Medical training does also require you to do things that you probably don't want to do. There's going to be more than a few days where you have to study 8 or 10 plus hours. Sometimes you have to spend 17, 19, 20 hours in the hospital, go home, sleep for 2 hours, and then come back the next day. You'll miss social events, family gatherings, even holidays to achieve your goal. So you learn to make sacrifices in the short term in order to achieve your long-term goal, which again is another valuable trait when it comes to entrepreneurship and succeeding in business. Med students also often have a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset. Individuals with a fixed mindset often believe that things like intelligence or abilities or talents are inherent and they're stable, they're unchangeable. In contrast, those with a growth mindset believe that these traits can be developed and honed over time. Having a growth mindset is essential in both business and medicine. In both fields, you will be challenged physically, emotionally, and intellectually. And if you feel like you don't have a growth mindset entering medical school, by the time you graduate, you probably will, because it's almost impossible not to. Self-direction is another key trait that doctors have that's key to success as an entrepreneur. Med school does require a lot more independent study than most people realize. No one's breathing down your neck telling you to drop your phone and put down the Rice Krispies and start studying. You have to have the self-discipline to do it yourself. In residency, you're even less directed than you were in medical school, and as an attending, you're completely on your own. You really need to be self-directed and self-motivated with your learning. Becoming an entrepreneur is similar. You won't have someone there telling you what to do next. Instead, you're going to have to think critically for yourself and decide what's the next best move. And sometimes you're going to get that wrong, and you'll have to live with the consequences of that decision. But just like in medicine, you'll learn and adapt to the problems that you face, and you'll grow as an individual in the process. Lastly, is that communication skills are critical to being an effective doctor. You need to be able to talk with your patient, determine their needs, and effectively communicate with them and the rest of the healthcare team the diagnosis and the treatment plan. Doctors spend years honing the ability to communicate effectively, and this is a skill that will obviously serve you very well in business. All right, so med students and doctors, they have a lot of the traits that make for successful business people. So why don't we see more med students and doctors becoming entrepreneurs? The first reason is opportunity cost. On average, it takes between 11 and 14 years to become a physician in the US. So by the time you've completed your 4 years of college, 4 years of med school, 3 to 7 years of residency, 1+ years of fellowship, you've already committed a lot of your life to medical training. And most people don't want to take on another challenging endeavor like starting a business once they've already grinded so hard through all their 20s and even into some of their 30s just to become a doctor. Many will want to dial back and focus on other aspects of their life, things that were neglected because medical training was front and center, things like family and relationships. Second is finances, because the majority of medical students are taking out loans to pay for medical school. When you have so much debt, you can just work as a doctor and pay that off guaranteed, rather than taking on business which may or may not pay off. Which brings me to the third and final point, risk aversion. As Dr. Goldman puts it in his Why I Did Plastic Surgery video, medicine is a mecca for the intelligent but risk averse.
Medicine really is a mecca for the intelligent but risk averse.
Becoming a doctor is a relatively guaranteed path to high income when compared to becoming an entrepreneur. You go to college, you get into med school, you work hard, get into residency, work hard, become a full-fledged attending doctor. If you just walk down this very clear-cut pathway laid out in front of you, you're gonna become an attending physician and you're gonna have a high salary and all the perks that come with becoming a doctor. But entrepreneurship and business, they're nothing like that. There's no straightforward path. There's no guarantee that your business is gonna succeed. In fact, you could put in countless hours and so much money into your business idea and it could all ultimately fail. A lot of people are gonna tell you that 80 or 90+% of small businesses fail. And I get it, those figures are pretty scary, but I don't think they tell you the full story. If you're constantly educating yourself about business and you're learning from your mistakes, then I believe that most med students and most doctors can in fact become successful entrepreneurs. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, you'll definitely like this one or that one. Much love, and I'll see you guys there.